Hello, Andy. This is Colin. I won't be able to get in tonight. I'm sweating.
And we're back. One Up Gaming, episode 4. No, I keep saying 400. It's not. It's 350. I genuinely have to have my phone next to me to see what the last one that I recorded was. Because numbers are hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a special guest on this time, so please just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ross Brierley. I work at Ghostlight and Laughing Jackal, where I'm the community manager, PR person, tester, and pretty near everything else at the moment. So, yeah, I've been there 16, 17 years now, and since the PS2 days. And we primarily do bring Japanese games to the West. We used to develop a few of our own, but now we pretty much just exclusively bring over Japanese games or port them over for other publishers to release in the West.
So you must have seen some weird games that have been over there.
To be honest, most of the strangest games I've worked on have probably been Western games, because back in the old days, when I first started, we were also Midas Interactive, and we released a lot of budget games. Did a lot of budget games. Some of them were pretty good. Some of them were...
I'm just trying to think. Wasn't that like Mr. Mosquito and things like that?
Yes, that was a bit before my time, but yes. And there's a huge range, lots of racers, lots of shooters, lots of puzzle games. There's a strange one we never actually did, which was a sort of match 4 type thing about octopus balls falling from the sky, and you had to sort of match them. That was fun, but unfortunately we never actually did it. We got a review copy in to evaluate, but we couldn't actually do it. But I liked that one. Had the most catchy theme song ever as well.
Oh, that's... So how many games would you say you've had your hands in?
It's been a long time since I've sat down and worked it out. But when I last did, I was probably comfortably over 150. So...
That's not bad.
Yeah, I think that was a few years ago, so it's probably getting near 200 now, but yeah. I've been working at the same company since the PS2 era, so yeah, there's been a few. The most recent one we did, if I can get a cheap plug in, is Agrest, or Generations of War on Switch, which released exactly a month ago, in fact, the 24th of March, which is a return of a game I've worked on several times. We originally did the PS3 game version, which was the last ever PS3 game, but didn't have trophies. A little fact I remember, because we had a few people emailing me asking if we could add them, but it wasn't speed. And I also worked on a PC version, so it was kind of like having an old friend back. To the extent, in the second dungeon, when I was walking through, I just suddenly started sort of turning off the main path to where all the chests were without really thinking about it. Just because I was the muscle memory was so strong, I was just, oh yeah, there's a chest here. So yeah.
And I know you've sort of said that you've worked on a lot of varied genres, like races, puzzles, RPGs.
Yeah.
Would you say the vast majority would be the RPG at the moment?
Certainly in recent years, yes. Since probably the later PS3 era, we've primarily worked with Japanese publishers, either releasing their games ourselves, or often more recently doing them for other publishers. We've done a lot of JRPGs, quite a few visual novels, though we've never actually released one ourselves. But it's something we'd be interested in, but the right game has never quite come along for us. But we've been asked to support a lot from people. Some action games. We did the Way of the Samurai games on Steam, although we lost the rights to them, so they're now published by someone else. But they're still very cool games. Yeah.
It's a scary world we live in now, especially when a lot of stuff's all like downloadable, and a lot of games like let's just say like the Forza games, they only get like a 2-3 year license for the cars, so they can only have the game on sale for like 3 years.
Yeah, in this case, the games are still on sale, but just with the original Japanese publisher controlling the rights to them, so it's their release now.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy working on them.
So
really good character customization.
I'm just having a look in your background. I don't know why, but it looks like Sega Saturn games, but it can't be.
No. It's mainly books, CDs, and a few DVDs. I sort of got my gaming stuff somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm working from home today, so this is kind of my home. Background, home office / bedroom.
No, it looks pretty cool. I don't know why they do look like Sega Saturn cases to me, but I don't know. So what would you say is your primary gaming system at the minute?
Mainly PC. I primarily play on Steam. I do have access. I do have a PS4. I do sometimes play on that, but usually Steam. I'd also kind of like to get a Switch, but it hasn't quite happened yet. But it does look a lot. There's a lot of Switch games. I'm like, really fancy playing that. So.
Which I used to have a Switch, but I sold it. It was basically my what to do when I was bored at the toilet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I found with handheld consoles is I always end up playing them in the same place. I play my PC games, like set up a desk, except instead of playing with a mouse and keyboard, I'm holding the Vita or whatever like this, and just I don't really take them out much.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think my Switch, it was literally, I had it to work and everything, but it never came out. It was just like when I was sat at home bored.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a mobile gaming platform. It was just like sat at home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really use portables very, very portably. So, but it's one of those, there's enough games on there, but I'm really tempted to Fire Emblem ones, and because our switch to Japanese games has been really good for me personally, because that's the kind of stuff I love. So I've always been into the RPGs and things. So for me, getting to work on more of them has been fantastic. So yeah, that's the sort of game I'll be getting a Switch for as well.
I mean, I think for me personally, I've only ever enjoyed one, like what you would consider a JRPG. And that was, I think it was Microsoft's, was it Lost Odyssey?
I've never actually played that one. I've heard really good things about it, but I never had an Xbox. So it's like, if I ever got one, that was one of the games I wanted to play, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, no, Mistwalker did an absolutely fantastic job on that game. It was amazing.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it.
But I mean, like, for me, I don't know about you because like you're UK as well, but like a lot of the so-called mainstream gaming press, they go on massively about Nintendo and their games just because of the history of Nintendo in America, like covering like 98% of sales and everything. So a lot of people, it might be a so-so game, but because of all the the history and everything. They just go massively over the top with a lot of the Nintendo sort of games.
I mean, for me personally, I haven't owned a lot of Nintendo consoles in recent years. I had a Wii. Before that, my first console was an NES, so I sort of was a Nintendo child growing up. And I think they do fantastic games, but like they have certain styles that they're very, very good at. And outside, for me, that's pretty good. I love the Fire Emblem series. I enjoy platformers, so their platforming games are good. Mario Kart's always a great laugh when you've got some mates round. So for me, they really work. But obviously, the thing about video games these days, I mean, even more so, it's always been like that, but even more these days, there's such a wide variety of things that, you know, no one publisher or console manufacturer is going to satisfy everyone's sort of preferences. And I think Nintendo quite clearly sort of understand what your average Nintendo fan wants, what sort of person who buys a Switch wants, and are very good at homing in and creating games for that market. They're very creative within that space. Obviously, if you don't quite fall into that category, it's not going to work for you very well.
I mean, I do think it's funny because like we've had a couple of people on our team who have been American, and when I mentioned to them that the Master System outsold the NES 4-1 in the UK, they're absolutely flabbergasted.
I mean, it's one of the things about being in an English-speaking country that American history, particularly in the gaming space, sort of kind of overwrites UK gaming history unless you're really into it. Like, it's things like the talk of a gaming crash that happened about the Atari, which
the 1983
really
crash.
here.
It never happened here because we had like the Spectrum, the C64,
Yeah.
we had all these other things happening.
Yeah, so you don't quite have the same history of Nintendo coming into a field that was not quite in ruins, but, you know, had very much seen better days and reviving it here. It was, as I say, I was a NES kid growing up, so I was a Nintendo kid, but, you know, there's a huge variety of things people have. I knew a lot of people with Segas. I knew people with Spectrums, with Amigas. So, yeah, well, you know, you had a much bigger variety here than you had in the States, I think, in that period.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you can see or not, but I've got like a stupid Sega Saturn tattoo on my hand.
Yeah.
That was my favorite game back in when Sega was doing the early like Model 2 sort of arcade games.
Yeah.
Like Virtua Fighter 2 is one of my favorites, Virtua Cop, Sega Rally. All these like fast-paced arcade sort of games I used to love.
Yeah.
And I mean I come from a generation where I like to have a little bit of anything. I can't sit down and play one game for like 20 hours. I'll play something for half an hour, then turn it off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting to the point now where I don't have as much time to play video games as I used to, which means in practice, if I play an RPG, I've usually got sort of 2 games on the go. I've got an RPG, which I'll sort of have ongoing, and that will take like a month or something for me to finish. And then I'll have, you know, a little thing, maybe a platformer or a sports game that I'm sort of playing just for sort of for a bit of variety during that period. But just, I mean, I guess that's the thing about what, you know, working and all that. You don't have the time you used to breeze through a sort of 60, 70-hour RPG in like a few weeks.
No, I mean, I don't think I've ever. It's like that Lost Odyssey. I think it was on 4 DVD discs.
Yeah.
and I don't think I got off the first disc.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, I used to be terrible at finishing games when I was younger. Like, I never used to finish anything that's particularly long. Whereas these days, sort of, I guess, 10, I don't know, but I've got a lot better at sort of finishing games. Like, I think the first Final Fantasy game I ever actually finished was Final Fantasy 13. All the others I sort of played and got quite far into and then drifted off into another game. So that was the first one I actually sort of sat down and finished. And that was probably around the period where I got better at finishing RPGs.
Wasn't 13 meant to be the bad one?
I wouldn't say it's bad. It's not quite as good as some of the others. It's not as good as... I mean, my favourites were like 7, 9. I really liked 9. 12 was pretty cool as well. 13, I don't think was quite on the same level as... Oh, for me, anyway, wasn't quite on the same level as those three. It was... I mean, I still enjoyed it. I finished it, and if I hadn't enjoyed it, I probably wouldn't. But I think I prefer the sort of the few ones slightly earlier in the series. That's all.
Yeah,
Probably,
I mean, I guess I
my
don't
sort
like the random battle encounters.
I mean, yeah, I think that's probably my sort of Final Fantasy Golden Age. But then at the same time, how much of that is I was younger and you know you always look back fondly at things that came out when you were like, I must have been like in my teens when Final Fantasy VII came out. It's kind of hard for a game that comes out in the same series when you're an adult to compete with your memories from that era.
I think I'd have been about 18, 19 when Final Fantasy VII came out.
Yeah, I can't really remember when it was, but
Was it 98?
yeah. So I've been about 14, 15 then. So you know, for a game to come out, yeah, when you play a game quite a lot when you're 14 and 15, it's going to be very hard for a game you play a lot, like 10, 12 years later, to sort of compare the two, because you're always going to have very fond memories of that sort of period.
So, what did you make of the Final Fantasy VII remake that they did?
I think it's really interesting. Like, obviously, there was some expectation, certainly on my part, there would be a lot closer to the original Final Fantasy VII than it ended up being. But in a way, I think it's quite an interesting and brave idea to just sort of take it in a very different direction than the original Final Fantasy VII went in. Because as I've sort of mentioned, you probably can't compete with my hazy memories of sort of 15 and 16, putting it on the PS1 and it was PS1. And I hadn't played a JRPG before that. So, you know, it formed a lot of my opinions of what a JRPG is. I'm not sure you can really compete with those memories. So to sort of try and take it in a different direction was quite an interesting call, I think.
Yeah, I think after the initial backlash of how the game was, I do think that there was more in the game for newer people to get into and to actually hold on to.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the issue with remakes, particularly remakes of something that's so fondly remembered, that you're trying, you know, my memories of Final Fantasy VII are very different, and what Final Fantasy VII actually was are very different things. Like, I remember actually on my big TV a few years back, I fired up Final Fantasy VII, the original, and sort of played a bit, and it's still a fun game. I still enjoyed it, but I was like, did it really look like this? This doesn't look quite right.
very pixelated and washed out.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, one, obviously at the time, what you were used to was very different to what you're used to now. Also, the preceding decades have sort of, I say, left a slightly hazy vision of what it was like, and it's just, yeah, it looked really cool, and I've got these memories of it looking a lot better than it actually was, you know. But I don't know, better's the right word, because obviously you're sort of working within the technology of the time, and what seemed fantastic then looks old and potentially a bit dated. I think Final Fantasy in particular, because it was sort of pushing the edges of what was done, is particularly susceptible to that. But it's still, I mean, it's still a fun game. But I do think the decision to go, you know, off in a different direction really, you know, was a really interesting and quite cool, quite brave move.
So I think for me, my favourite sort of era was the early 32-bit, when they were doing the really cool looking 3D environments that look absolutely janky to hell now, but back then it was amazing.
Yeah. Like, I think it's an era that's kind of hard to go back to, because it was, I mean, at the time it was amazing, but they were still working a lot of things out. And you sort of go back every now, you can see the potential. There's some really cool stuff, but at the same time, it's like it's similar enough to how things work now, but the differences completely throw you.
I mean, for me, I think the biggest difference was the actual controller.
Yeah.
Because the original PlayStation and the original Sega Saturn was just a D-pad and buttons.
Yeah.
So if they were trying to make a full 3D environment, it was very hard to control the characters in that world.
Yeah,
until they came out with their 3D control pads.
Yeah, the control system. And even when they started doing that, obviously, because everyone had to kind of make things up as they were going along, because obviously, until then, it had been, you know, 2D or top down. So trying to work out how was best to control these things in characters in a 3D environment sort of took a fair bit of trial and error. So, yeah, the controls generally, when I go back to these games, are what throws me.
So I think we'll end this kind of thing soon. I just want to know, because you've been in your job for very many years, what would you say is your favourite 3 games that you've worked on?
First one is Legend of Heroes Trials Must Die on PSP, which was kind of my baby in that I'd seen people in America talking about it. It's a first part of a very big, sprawling JRPG series, and I'd seen a lot of people talking about the American release and how cool it was. I was like, I want to play that. So I sort of spoke to my boss. We got a evaluation copy. I played a bit of it in work, and I ended up borrowing the work PSP, taking the game home with me so I could finish it. I then proceeded to basically, well, after I completed it and submitted my evaluation, just shout at every random passerby, "Hey, sign Trails of the Sky!" I'm not sure it achieved anything beyond confusing the cleaning staff, but we did eventually sign it, and I then did a lot of the testing, and I was already sort of handling the PR, community management, and I even went down to the warehouse to help ship out copies. So I was really involved in that. Second favourite one, Persona 3 Portable. I loved Persona 3, and right before the final boss, when I played it on PS2 at home, my save got corrupted, and I couldn't finish it. So to get the PSP version and actually finish the game was great, and it's a really, I mean, everyone who's really into JRPGs knows Persona. It's a big series, and to sort of be involved in that as well was very cool. And my third third one is probably actually one we did ourselves as Laughing Jackal, Flame Over on PC, which was, and Beta as well, which is a sort of top-down squirt 'em up, we used to call it.
Is that the firefighter one?
Yeah.
I think it's also on like 360, or the Xbox One and the PS4. Because I'm sure I got sent review copies of it.
Yeah, I don't. It certainly wouldn't have been on Xbox, but it might have been on PS4. I'm trying to. It's been a long time, but I remember really enjoying that, and that was definitely the biggest game we ever developed in house. So sort of seeing it emerge from some very simple early prototypes to what I thought was a really cool sort of, as I say, shoot 'em up, but you're putting out fires rather than shooting, and also rescuing people and cats as well. Can't forget rescuing the cats.
Yeah, I thought it was really good, but for me, it was too hard.
I think if we could go back to it, the difficulty is probably the thing we'd look at. Like, it's because it's got a very, very cartoony look and looks kind of almost like it's aimed at a young age, but the difficulty is quite punishing.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So, Ross, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for having me, and congratulations on 350 episodes.
Thank you. You remembered it better than I did.
I've been revising.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.